A moment of significant change or a turning point, altering your course, is known as an inflection point. In business, these moments have a significant impact in many ways. That's why we're speaking with leaders from across the asset management industry to hear the stories of their inflection points and the impact they've had on their journeys. Join me and my colleague Mark Spina as we explore the business of being in business, with insights that can help you wherever you may find yourself. This is Inflection Points.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Inflection Points. I'm Jillian DelSignore, one of your hosts, along with my colleague Mark Spina. I am so excited today to be joined by a friend and longtime industry colleague, Suzanne Siracuse. Suzanne is the CEO and founder of Suzanne Siracuse Consulting. She is also the creator and the host of the Big Reveal podcast, and we'll talk a bit more about that as we go through and where you can find that podcast if you're interested in taking a listen, which I highly recommend. Suzanne spent 23 years at Investment News, ultimately culminating as publisher and CEO of that organization. She and I crossed paths as we were discussing before we started recording today, what feels like many moons ago now, back in we believe the early aughts, maybe 09, 2010. When I was back at, I guess it would have been at that point, BlackRock iShares, and Investment News was doing some work here in Chicago, and have certainly followed her journey as she has mine. So really excited to talk with her about those years at Investment News. And then, of course, most specifically, the transition that she made not too long ago away from that business and into running her own organization. So Suzanne, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so pleased to be here and looking forward to the discussion.
Me too. Thank you so much for having me. And I just wanted to give you a compliment right off the bat.
Yeah.
I love the title of your podcast and the inflection point, and it makes you think about things that maybe you hadn't thought about in the same way. So I know we're going to talk about some of those, but what are those key inflection points? I would highly recommend everyone think about what inflection points exist in their life, because it's really interesting when you start to analyze it that way. I want to give you that compliment.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that so much. It makes you start to think about what those were. And what we love to talk about here is what drove those decisions? What was the catalyst? What was the guiding light? And take us back, which is where I'd love to start with you, is take us back to your more formative years. We can go to Rider University or preceding that, wherever you want to start, and just think about what were some of those early influences? Because you were, forgive me if I'm getting this incorrect, but you were journalism from the get, right? Studied. And so was there something that as you were thinking about it growing up that really drove you in that direction?
So again, when I was thinking about what were those formative inflection points,
Yeah.
I thought about the fact, I'm going to go way, way back, when we moved to Medford, New Jersey, when I was in fourth grade. Prior to that, I know this is going to be shocking, was incredibly shy, like
Okay.
never spoke in class, all of that. And we moved, which you would think would make it even harder, but
Right.
I made like my best friend. Her name's Ann Denyon. In fact, I am still friends with her to this day.
Amazing.
And she was a incredibly smart, very funny young woman. We became best friends. And I would say she got me out of a comfort zone that I existed in. We almost had opposite family lives. I grew up primarily, my brother and sister were much, much older and out of the house by the time I was 6. So I had an only child syndrome. And Anne was one of 5 children, and she was the only. They were all like within, I would say, a few years of each other, and their house was insane. My house, like everything had to be dusted, everything had to be put away. I'd go over there and it was like no holds barred. I was a very girly girl, and Anne was a amazing athlete. So I wanted to be just like Anne. So I would try every sport. Not very good at any of it.
But you tried.
But I tried. But what I would say is when I thought about that, I'm like, she was a catalyst to unleashing a part of my personality that I think
Oh.
was a little hidden and really got me out of my comfort zone. And then, of course, I haven't shut up since. But really, I think instilled like a confidence, and just was the beginning of, I think, the beginning of a lot of important friendships. Friendships are the consistent area throughout my life. Friendships, relationships, that type of thing. And then I would also say I was very lucky. My parents have always been, always were super supportive. They were my biggest fan. I had tons of confidence from them. I never thought I couldn't do something or achieve something. My mother was a bit ahead of her time. My father was super, super supportive of everything female. And that really gave me a lot of confidence as I went out to college and into the workforce. I went to college at Rider, you alluded to, and had the great group of women that I'm still friends with. We're all strong personalities, all very different, and we're all still in each other's lives. In fact, we have a WhatsApp chat that goes out every morning to this day. There's about 10 of us. So
Every morning.
every morning. Now,
Wow.
that wasn't always, that just happened during COVID, quite
Oh,
frankly.
for sure.
And we just started to make sure that we were back in touch with each other on a more regular basis. So I think just having those really great, strong friendships, having a support system from my parents. I know not everybody is that fortunate. I was very fortunate, and that does give you a leg up. Also, traveling in my 20s and 30s opened my entire mind to understanding different cultures, appreciating so many different things, and trying new things and letting go of any fears that I may have had. That was, I guess, another major inflection point. And then finally, before we get to the professional stuff, leaving my very comfortable job, a lot of friends and family in the Philadelphia area, go Eagles, and moving to New York City and starting completely fresh in a, I would say, similar career, but definitely different. So
Different.
those were some major inflection points for me.
That's awesome. It sounds to me, one thing I was writing down was just like thriving off friendships, right? It's like it's a lifeblood going all the way back to fourth grade, which is incredible. I hope Anne understands the impact she's had on your life because
She
that's
does
awesome.
actually, Jillian. Ironically, she and my other friend from fourth grade came out to my house this summer. I took 2 days off during the week. My husband was back in the city. I was at our house by the beach, and we had the most amazing time. And we were talking about how important we were to each other during that time period, and how even my mother was very influential in her life. So it was wonderful to reflect back on that stuff.
It really is so important. I had a couple of aunts in my life, I think, that had an influence. You have parents that are obviously very supportive, but I think seeing that and feeling that from the periphery can be so impactful on someone's life. And it's interesting you talk about that move from Philadelphia to New York. I feel like that's kind of what happened to me when I moved from Pittsburgh to Chicago. It's like you never look back. You never
No.
look back. And again, the journey's never a straight line. You never look back on the impact that had and the chance that you took. And so why don't we start there? What was that, I guess, going from and to, I know, but let's tell the folks listening. And what was the driving force behind that? What gave you the confidence to make that shift?
I was a marketing major
Yeah.
and a journalism minor. I thought I was going to write commercials. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to
Jingles.
write commercials for a
Yeah.
living. There was a very creative side to my personality. And I graduated in 1987, and it was
Mhm.
not an easy time to get jobs
Yeah.
and things like that. And I also was fairly motivated by money. I'd always worked. I started cleaning houses. I babysat. I worked at
Wow.
the 7-Eleven. I worked from the time I was, I want to say 12 years old, because I liked having money. That was always important. I worked all through college. I worked every summer to fund my beach house. So anyway,
Which you now have. So
which I
there
now
you go.
actually own one.
There's
Yeah, like
something
it was
to that, this vision that carries you through, right?
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I love that.
So yeah, so I studied marketing and journalism, and I realized I couldn't get a job writing commercials. That just didn't exist at when you're 21 years old. They're not just going to show you
Yeah.
this fabulous job. I ended up working for a magazine, the Philadelphia Business Journal, and working selling advertising. And when I got there, one of the reasons I took the job was because I loved the woman that I was going to work for.
Oh.
And so her name was Ellen Douglas. And what I realized is that, like, she was, I think, head of marketing at the time. The head of sales was a woman,
Wow.
and the publisher was a woman.
In the late
So
80s.
in the late 80s.
It's extraordinary.
And I thought all of them were fabulous, but especially the publisher. She was
Yeah.
super glamorous. She had all these shoes under her desk and great handbags. And she was always like running out to meetings and always seemed very important. And I was like, I want to do that. That's what I want
Yeah.
to be. So all of a sudden we always say you can't be it unless you see it. I saw it. I saw it immediately. I walked in every day, saw her. She's still the publisher of not the Philadelphia Business Journal anymore, but the San Francisco Business Times. She's been there for 20 something years.
That's incredible.
Isn't that amazing? Isn't that
You're
amazing?
describing how I felt about Sue. You're so
Really?
funny, right? Like you had that, you saw it, right?
Yes.
I was once told dress for the job you want, not the job you have.
Yep.
And like you own it, you see it. Love that. That's wonderful. And the fact that she's still the publisher of it's amazing.
I know. I'm like, I don't know. I feel like calling her. We are in touch every once in a while on LinkedIn. I feel like
Yeah.
calling her saying, my God, how are you still doing that?
I
It's a
know.
grind. It's not easy. I will be honest.
Print no less. Wow.
Exactly. They do a lot more, but still it's
Okay.
digital and events
Sure.
and research, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, so seeing that was possible,
Yeah.
having this wonderful first manager, Ellen, and she was just fun and smart and just it made the experience made me want to stay in publishing,
Mhm.
right? And I was so close to advertising, but not writing the stuff. I was selling it. So that's really how I got into that business. And at age 30, decided a lot of my friends back in that time period were getting married, starting
Mhm.
families. I was single. There was a whole group of us that were single, but I just felt like I'd been there for 8 years. I felt like I was doing a lot, really enjoyed it, but I really felt like there was more. There was something else calling me and ended up going to New York and working for pensions and investments. I had called on a lot of financial service firms at the Philadelphia Business Journal, banks, etc. And this sounds terrible going back to the money thing, but they always had large advertising budgets. So I sought out going to another financial type of media company, and it was Pensions and Investments, which was owned by Crane Communications,
Yeah.
which owns Crane Chicago Business and a lot of others. And worked there, had amazing colleagues there. Again, part of this was all like, I had a great time at my job. I really liked what I did, and the people were awesome. My clients were awesome. And my boss or my boss's boss was a gentleman by the name of Bill Bison. And he was the publisher of Pensions and Investments. And was back in the day where people smoked in the office. And he was super intelligent. And one day he came to me and he's like, I'm about to launch this new like sister publication to Pensions and Investments called Investment News. It's for the wealth management industry. And I'm wondering if you'd like to leave Pensions and Investments and help be part of the launch team. And I was, no offense to Pensions and Investments, it was a little bit sleepier than what I was used
Oh,
to.
absolutely.
And I said it was going to be weekly, which is what I had come from. And I jumped at the chance, absolutely jumped at the chance, launching something new. They hired Abby Hershkowitz at the time, Abby Salome now. A lot of people may know her.
Oh,
She
yeah.
was one of my friends. We've been friends since 1998.
So
And
I never
she
made that
became a
connection.
sales. I know, isn't it crazy? She became a salesperson there. She grew up in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, which was like the next town over from Medford. We had a lot of synergies. We traveled. There were a million conferences as we traveled all across the country, had a wonderful time, really learned the business, got very interested in what it was. Because I'd had my first financial advisor when I was in my 20s. A friend of mine's husband said, oh, you should get a financial advisor. We just got one. They can help you with making more money from your money. And again, the money thing. I was like, I'm
Exactly.
done. So I started
That's so
using,
forward thinking of you to do that in your 20s.
yeah, when I think back, I'm like, that was pretty crazy. I know I bought my first apartment when I was 26. So I was
I was with you. I bought a
very,
house when I was like 23, 24 years old. Yeah.
that's like back in that day, that was not
Yeah.
traditional, right? So anyway, I really fell in love with the financial advice industry
Yeah.
and loved what I did and really was excited to have my dream come true and be like the Mary Huss, the publisher of investment news.
Yeah.
And that happened in 2006. And it was something that I had wanted and lobbied for, I'll be honest, for a
Mhm.
while. I made it very known that when my boss was getting promoted, that there wasn't really, he was mentoring me to be his
Mhm.
successor. So it was a wonderful kind of dream come true. And what happened throughout that time, there are a million inflection points during my time in
Totally.
investment news.
Sure. I want to get into some of them, but I'm just reflecting back on what you were talking about and this kind of lobbying for yourself and making it known what you want to do. I think back to Ellen, and if you had remained that shy little girl, right? Would you have had the gumption to do some of the things? There's something to this coming out of your shell and really finding yourself and finding your voice and how it drives so much into the future. Because you have to, I think when we as women need to do a better job of advocating for ourselves and making it known. It might not be your job today, but you want it to be your job tomorrow and making sure everybody knows that and
Yeah,
seeing it.
absolutely. And then that's why when that question, how you posed, what's your like formative inflection, you're right. Like it really was that complete transformation
Yeah.
during that time period when I was in like fourth, fifth grade, which is really crazy. Seriously, I was so shy, barely
Yeah.
spoke in school. Now, with friends and stuff, I was fine, but it was
Mhm.
really, I don't know. And again, I should regress. I have no idea why that was, but it was. And I became a lot more confident after getting exposed to Anne and her family.
Yeah, that's amazing. So 23 years at Investment News. 2006 was when you became the publisher, so clearly a huge inflection point, right? But are there
Yes.
ones
Yep.
that stand out to you? And I want to touch on your sort of the tail end of your time there. But throughout the early part of that time, were there certain inflection points that stand out to you? Clearly '06, but things that sort of stand out to you because that much time in one seat, right? It still is not a straight line.
No,
So,
not
are
even
there things that
close.
stand out to you as you think about it?
There are a couple things. First of all, the business of running at that point a news first was a newspaper, the digital phenomenon.
Oh,
So
of
leading
course.
it through going from a print newspaper to launching the website to really the business model completely changed. I look back and just, we didn't know what we didn't know. You know what I mean? It was so unknown. There were so many unknowns, pricing, digital advertising, all of those things, launching events, launching research. Nobody had experience doing that at that point. So it was, those things were really, I would say, critical of how you handled change, how you embraced like just completely new way of doing business. And we really got on the bandwagon. I would say at Crean, there were about, I think 14 brands. We were one of the advertising age was the first brand to go really all in on digital. And we were probably the second brand. And the reason being is, I think between myself and an amazing team that I had of just really looking at the future and seeing what was happening in media consumption, we needed to really completely overhaul our business model. That was a huge inflection point. But even before that, I would say, I've said this on my podcast and I've said this a couple of times, but what a lot of people don't know is that when I became publisher, I was so super happy. It was everything that I'd wanted, but I also was scared out of my mind, not because I didn't think I could run the business. That I was pretty confident because I knew I was going to have to speak in public. And I
Really?
was deathly afraid of getting up on stage. Now, this goes back to, remember, I didn't like to speak in
So
school.
shy. Yeah.
Deathly afraid to do any of that. And when I realized that we were starting to launch events and I was going to be having to be out there, I was fine in meetings and presentations I could do in my sleep. But when I actually had to, even if it was making an introduction of somebody else that was speaking, I was a wreck. And I'm not exaggerating at all. Ask a lot of the people that worked with me in that day. Pavia,
Mhm.
who's at C, has been at CNBC for a long time, for
Mhm.
Gabriel, Mark Bruno. all of them will tell you, Mary Marr, I was a basket case. And it took me a very long time to get over that. And I enlisted this gentleman by the name of John Pitti, who's since passed away, but
Okay.
he was a prior president of the FPA, was the president of Seligman, and he was an advisor to Bill Bison on investment news. And I remember asking him, we knew we were going to start to launch events.
Yep.
There was just so many things that I needed to do. My job, if I wanted to do my job correctly, I needed to be able to public speak.
Right.
And you just have to practice, over prepare. And I forced myself to take on engagements that I did not want to do. I was petrified to do. And finally, like I would say maybe 6 or 7 years ago, I got a lot more comfortable with being on stage, with speaking, doing webinars, all of that. It took a really long time.
Yeah, that is a long time. Do you feel like there was a switch that flipped, or was it something that just over time you gained a little more comfort every time?
I think it was over time doing more and more of it. And I would say one other inflection point was when we launched the Women to Watch initiative at Investment News and the awards. And I had to be up on stage for a very long period of time. And I had to, I would say, not operate off of a script. Actually, I started realizing that if I just was authentic and didn't get so nervous about saying the wrong thing or saying something stupid, that I just would react to the stories of the women. And what I realized is that was when everybody's, oh my God, you're a natural up there. And I'm like, what?
Because you're being your
Nobody ever
authentic
said
self.
that to me because I was always like reading the script and very
Yeah.
nervous.
Yeah.
And so that initiative was an inflection point for a variety of reasons, right? For me feeling very comfortable, starting to feel very comfortable in front of people by being myself and using humor, but also the initiatives that all of those, I would say, game changing initiatives that we launched at Investment News in this very specific time period, whether it was 40 under 40, Women to Watch, diversity inclusion, best places to work, all of these, what I would say, game changing type of initiatives that were I would go back and say to my team, our mission is not just to report on the news. Our mission is to create the news. That was a big priority for me and for our editor to really start being the place and the platform where we were launching some of these important initiatives.
The
So
word that's coming to my mind, and that's incredible. And I think sometimes I forget all that was launched in that time. I think you see a headline, right? And it's CEO, publisher of Investment News, and you forget not only were you working and running a publication during the time of the single biggest shift in the way people consume media, right? And having to take yourselves from paper to digital. But these initiatives Women to Watch, 40 under 40, things that have had an impact on the industry in ways that are indescribable, and the careers of said people. And just thinking back on women that I know that have been named over the years, and it's just amazing. The word impact just comes to mind so specifically. And this idea of finally letting your authentic self come out. And that was a pivot that allowed you to feel more comfortable. I was always told that no one knew what you were going to say except you. So don't worry about it. No one knew what you were going to say. So they don't know if you said something wrong. Right?
that's great. I wish somebody would have said that to me. 'Cause
Yeah,
that's a good one.
that's what I've always been told, but I love that, this idea of being your authentic self and how it allows you to actually just finally get comfortable doing something. That's awesome. That's really awesome. Now, let's get a little closer to current, right? So if we think about Investment News towards the end of your time there was this sale and, you're moving on and things like that. Let's talk, because that's clearly a really important inflection point, and it's taken you to where you are today, which is running your own very successful business. But what was that like? And talk a little bit about that experience and what helped you get through what was tumultuous.
Oh, yeah, to say the least.
Yeah.
So it actually started years before the headline Suzanne Siracuse resigns from Investment News. That
Right.
was 2019, which is 3.5 years ago, which I
Crazy.
can't even believe. But I think there are a lot of people thought I would never leave, right? It was my baby. I operated it like I owned it, which was a mistake, by the way. And I did not own it. I'd have a much larger apartment if I owned it. Let's put it that way. I realized with some of those amazing initiatives that I was lucky to be a part of, that I was starting to fall in love more with our industry than I was with running a media business that reported on it. And the I doing that job, any job for that amount of time is you can get bored, you can maybe get stale. I don't know if I was stale. I wouldn't say that about myself. I don't think anybody would describe me that way. But I would say I was getting bored, and bored not meaning that I didn't have plenty to do. I'd plenty to do. I'd more than I could handle to do, but there was a repetition to it every year. So if you think about, we had almost no reoccurring revenue. Every year was like Groundhog Day, right? Renewing your sponsorships, renewing your advertising.
Oh, that's true. Of course.
So it was becoming harder and harder. The business model is a hard one. And it was becoming not as fun. And I go back to some of the reasons that I loved being in the media business for so long is there was a fun element to it. There was a creative element to it. And I was starting to feel a little like drugged down. So I enlisted a coach, Greg Friedman. You may know Greg from Private Ocean. Yeah. So one day we were having lunch in New York City. He was in from San Francisco. And he was like, so what are you doing after this? Like, meaning, what is your
What do you
next?
wanna-
And I said, I don't know. I haven't even thought about it. And he's like, do you want to do this forever? And I'm like, I'm so busy. I guess I'm not thinking about it. He's like, are you happy? And I was like, when people asked me how I was doing, this is like one thing I would ask people that are listening to think about. I would say busy. I wouldn't say great. I wouldn't say awesome. I wouldn't say tired. I wouldn't say having a down day. I would say busy,
Busy.
which is a avoider question, an avoider answer,
Yeah.
in my opinion. I was
Yeah.
busy, but I didn't want to address the fact that I wasn't really happy.
Yeah.
So he said that and it ignited something. And he's like, a great coach. You should talk to her. So I did. And I went through this whole exercise, couple months. And at the end of the exercise or end of my engagement with her, she's so, I don't think you're ready to leave. You are so tied to this brand. And I don't think that you fully understand what you want to do. And so she was like, you still need there's some self-discovery here.
Yeah.
There's still more you're doing there. She's like, I don't know what it is, but there's still something else you need to do there. And I'm like, oh gosh, I can't take anything else on.
Yeah.
And a month later, the Creans told me that they were selling investment news because they were buying out their uncle, and it was nothing personal. It was more, they could get a lot of money for it and they needed me to help sell it. And I said, wow, okay, this is it.
That was it.
Because the probability that we were going to find a buyer that was going to be fabulous to make me want to stay was low. So now it was about me taking on a completely new challenge of selling a business. I'd never known any way to do that. And we were a business that was inside a business that we had part of our business that was a separate P&L, but we also had all kinds of corporate services that were melded into a corporate budget. So there were it was hard. It was also, there were not a lot of people that were interested
Buying.
in a brand, especially for the price that we were looking for. Long story short, we did find someone, and that was Bond Hill. There were a couple things that I would do differently there, but it all ends to the outcome, which was, it was a catalyst for me to do something else. But I think I wanted to win the deal so bad that I probably ignored the culture signs of, is this really the right partner for us? It sounded glamorous. Oh, you're going to have global access. We're going to give you money for technology, all of that stuff. And I think that they had all good intentions. It didn't align with what I wanted. And I think what my leadership team had wanted. You stay for your year, you leave. And at that point, I knew the Cranes left me alone, right? They trusted me, which was nice. I don't think I could have gone to work for somebody. I think that would have been very weird for me. So the only option I had was to
They-
start my own consulting
right. Do your
business.
own thing.
And exactly. And so that was the catalyst there. But it was a really tough transition. I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about the way deals happen, which I had, again, no experience around, which is helps me now in some of the consulting that I do with some firms that are acquiring other firms. So in any case, can identify with some advisors that are looking to sell or looking to
Yeah,
buy. Not the same thing, but there are some similarities, I will say. So
absolutely.
so starting my own firm, the day it was announced, there was an event that I was planning on going to that night. And so I saw like a bunch of people in the industry that I
Mhm.
known for years, had dinner with one of them, and he had offered me a consulting job the next day. So
Hmm,
it became like, oh, okay,
I can do this.
maybe this is like a reality. And I also had I would say half of my advisory board members telling me, take some time, go to the beach, have a good time, relax. This has been a lot.
Yeah.
And I saw Joe Deitch, who is the founder of Commonwealth Financial, who is, again, another person that I heavily respected and loved his entrepreneurial spirit. We have a funny backstory of how we met many years ago. And he said to me, "You're hot right now. Don't wait. Go right into your business, launch your business right now." And even though 80% of the people said, take some time, relax, I knew he was right.
Yeah.
So that's what kind of happened. I am very lucky that I was able to rebrand myself out of the publisher of investment news to Suzanne Siracuse Consulting. I have a lot of clients that I knew from my investment news days, but that relationship aspect has carried over into this business significantly. Because even if like people genuinely liked me, but they're not going to hire me if I'm not good at what I do. Right. So you had to have both of those components. Are you really excellent at what you do? Because now we're hiring you. And do I like working with her or do I like working with them?
Absolutely. The way that I think about this, Suzanne, as I'm hearing you talk, is like you talk about this the brand being associated with investment news and being there so long. And Joe, you're hot now. You are a brand, right? Minus investment news. So, like, you brought the relationship, but you also brought credibility. Your brand was associated with credibility, knows what she's doing, can help my business grow. And I think that's what can make such a seamless transition. Because to your point, they're suddenly betting on you and you're betting on yourself. And I don't know, there's not a person I'd rather bet on than me and for you. So I think I'm curious as you transition, because I did a bit of consulting right when I left my previous firm as well. And it's funny because I kept getting asked, "Do you consult? Do you consult?" I'm like, maybe I should. I feel like I'm in a similar situation. Like maybe I should be doing this. But it is a different existence. Is there anything as you think about the end of that time in investment news and the pivot that you made? Was there anything you kept front of mind, guiding light and thoughts to help you steer through what was a pretty muddy.
I think that it was more after I came out of it
Yeah.
because going through it, it was like you're going through the seaweed and you see the gorgeous clear water.
Yeah.
I couldn't see the gorgeous clear water 100%. I had to leave before I could see the gorgeous
Yeah.
clear water because there was just a lot happening. And I felt a lot of pressure to the people that I was leaving behind
Sure.
for what they wanted to do. And I'd been overseeing that brand for a long time. So I had that ownership feeling. So I would say I really got clarity, and it's probably not the answer that a lot of I got clarity after
Oh, no, I can appreciate it. When you're
yeah,
in it, sometimes you're too in it to see it.
yeah. No, I was going to say, I knew that I would say it was clear that I needed to do something else to stay true to myself. And the clarity came pretty soon after. And that really looking and thinking, what do you love doing? Stephanie Bogan, who is a coach, says, have that line, like, what are the things that give you energy? Below the line, what are the things that take your energy? And I think after being in leadership roles from the time I was 27, I really wanted to focus on things that I could do without without managing people.
Mm.
That was hard for me to admit that I just didn't want to do that any longer. I really didn't. I kind of wanted to be an individual player. And I also didn't want the responsibility of others because had that for a long time and I took that very much to heart. So I wanted to just play by my own rules, make my own hours, be flexible, a place in my life where that is much more important to me. And my definition of success changed quite considerably of going from how much money am I making, how many people am I managing, all of that kind of thing that goes along with as you're building your career to what kind of impact am I leaving and where can I really be helpful in firms that are doing amazing things. And that's where I find myself now, which has been fabulous. And I've always said, like, the money will follow you if you're doing something that you love. And just that now, like, one of the things that's so interesting is I sponsored a lot of people along the way and I mentored a lot of people along the way. The majority of them worked for me. Now I'm getting women in our industry, super smart women that are saying, will you take the time to mentor me? Can we set up? I just had this one woman who's fabulous. She's like, this is what my expectations are of me. Here, she made it easy for me, quite frankly. Those looking for mentors, make it easy for the mentor.
Absolutely.
And so now that's really been an important part of like how I view success, helping others and really helping other companies and initiatives reach their full potential.
It sounds like leaving a legacy.
Yes.
You know
Even
what I
though
mean?
like that sounds old.
Oh, I know. I was just having this conversation with somebody earlier, and it is. I think you hit a part in your career where the idea of being happy and making an impact. And I think back on somebody told me one time, don't think about a title. I want to do X. I want to be X, right? I want to be a reporter. I want to be a publisher. I want to be a CEO. What is the description of what you want to do? Put the job title aside. And that's, I think, what you were describing, like what's above the line, what's below the line, and then what comes out as a result of that. And for you, it's this new phase and this new chapter in your life where you're helping impact in different ways, right? You're impacting organizations that you don't own, figuratively or literally, but that you can continue to have that impact. And I know I was going to mention all the people that used to work for you and they've all landed in awesome places, right?
Oh
Which I
my
think makes a
God.
huge
Yeah.
difference.
I would say that was the hardest thing at the end
Yeah.
because we had such an excellent leadership team. So leaving that team and especially going through a transition to a new owner, we became closer during that year. We were like, we're in this together. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? We were like each other's sounding boards. So that was the hardest thing. But I still am in touch with, I would say, all of them.
Yeah.
And even doing some work with Mark Bruno, who's over at
Wealth management.
wealthmanagement.com on some of their diversity initiatives, which is a really important area for me in my business. So they all landed in amazing places.
Absolutely. I've been working with Mark. I think what they're doing over there is awesome. And so it's been really cool to see people land in really great places and find their next chapters, come out of this on the other side, get the clarity, and be doing things they really want to be doing as well.
Yes.
That's awesome. Suzanne, this has just been amazing. I hope you appreciate the impact that you've had on the industry, on your peers, on your mentors, everybody, and the impact you continue to have with the firms that you work for. It has been a pleasure chatting with you today. I said earlier, I always feel like I learn something new every time I do one of these podcasts, even though I know folks so well before we do it. And I did today as well. And I guess thank you to Anne for helping you find your voice all those years ago.
Yeah, this was great. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to share my story, and hopefully something I've said maybe resonates with someone. It's good to know sometimes when whether it's the high highs or the low lows, that you're not out there alone. And thank you for the kind words. It's very humbling and sometimes a bit uncomfortable. But I love what I do, and I love our profession, and there's some great things happening, and I'm glad to still be a part of it.
Absolutely. And for those that want to connect with Suzanne, you can find her on LinkedIn. And you can also find the Big Reveal podcast wherever you get your podcasts, Google, Spotify, Apple, which is also where you can find inflection points on all of those outlets. And she did mention, I don't want to forget, a partnership with FA Magazines. You can actually go out to FA Mag and find her podcast as well. I hope everybody enjoyed this discussion with Suzanne. If you do, and you would love to listen to other conversations that Mark and I have had with others within the industry, you can find Inflection Points on all the platforms for podcasts, Google, Apple, and Spotify, as well as through Flex Networks. So we encourage you to join, become a member, and source not only the podcast, but all sorts of other research that you can find for your business. So thank you, everybody, for joining us this. We'll talk to you on the next episode.
The information contained in this recording is provided as is for educational and informational purposes only and should not serve as the basis for any trading or investing decisions. Flex Networks makes no representations and disclaims all express, implied, and statutory warranties of any kind to any viewer, listener, or other third party. Neither Flex Networks nor any of its affiliates make any endorsement of any particular company, security, product, or financial strategy, and nothing contained in this recording should be construed as investment advice. Investors should undertake their own due diligence and carefully evaluate companies before investing.